Hello and welcome to the Music is My Life podcast from Berklee Online. I'm your host, Pat Healy, and take note that at the end of this episode, you'll have an opportunity to take a Berklee Online course for $100 off the original price. Stay tuned for the credits or look for the details in the meta description of this episode to find out how. Now, take note of Lisa Loeb. You probably know her from her 1994 Grammy-nominated hit, Stay, I Missed You, which, by the way, she wrote during summer program at Berklee, just across the street from where I was sitting when I called her for this interview. Anyway, Lisa has had quite a musical life before and after that hit. She's made several children's albums, she's developed a line of fashionable eyeglasses, she's acted in TV shows. In fact, she recently made a guest appearance on the Netflix series Fuller House. And Lisa has a brand new album out called A Simple Trick to Happiness. But Lisa's musical life began with, well, she doesn't remember exactly where it began because music was always there. Let's let her tell you all about it.
By first grade, I was already completely immersed in music. I don't remember a time that there wasn't music that was really important to me. There was no decision to listen to it. We listened to the radio a lot in the car, AM and FM radio, which had the hits of those times. I remember songs like Rock the Boat and Stairway to Heaven. I remember our babysitter used to listen to the Mamas and the Papas on our turntable. My folks also listened to a lot of musical theater albums, standards. My dad played piano a lot. I started dance classes when I could walk, and we danced to a lot of different music. I'd watch my mother's dance classes. I remember hearing a song by It's a Beautiful Day called White Bird, which I really loved. And that tuned me in very early on to music and feelings and lyrics and sort of the multi-dimensional feeling of music. You could play music. You can dance to music. Music makes you feel things. You can take it with you throughout the day. It can change your moods. It can enhance your moods. It can, magnify your moods or alter your mood.
What was the first instrument you sat down and played?
Piano. I took piano lessons. I don't know how old I was when I started piano, 5, 6. It was just sort of what our family did. And by probably first grade in Dallas, first or second grade, probably first, I was taking 2 lessons a week. You would take one day of theory and you would take one day of actual just one-on-one piano lessons.
You have siblings, right?
Yes. My older brother is a pianist. He's a very accomplished classical pianist and a conductor. My sister took piano lessons. She makes dance pop music. And my younger brother took some piano too and guitar. By that time, I think my parents were hip to the fact that guitar, you could also learn music on. But we all grew up playing piano. Again, it's just culturally kind of what you did. You didn't think, do I want to or do I not want to take an instrument lesson? You just did it.
So your brother, what's his name? What's his professional name?
Benjamin Loeb.
And how about your sister?
Debbie Loeb. And my younger brother, he's not a professional musician, but he's a studio owner and an engineer. He has a couple of post-production audio facilities in New York.
I feel like I remember hearing an interview with you once and saying your parents weren't exactly thrilled you were going into the music business. Is that right?
Yeah, no, they think of music more as a hobby, which makes sense. Again, that's culturally kind of how we grew up. That's not a real job that you would have. But that being said, the majority of the time when we were kids, there was so much focus on our record collection, their record collection, listening to the radio, going to concerts, our piano lessons, practicing piano, talking about music, talking about musicians, basically everything having to do with music and the arts. I also was a dancer and an actor, and we had all the arts happening in our house, and doing visual art and the school play and acting and doing movies. And I was a DJ on the radio in high school and all kinds of things. But those were all aside from, getting good grades at school. So they just didn't think it was a real job. They thought it was very unreliable, which it is, but nowadays it doesn't seem as unreliable because everything is unreliable. But back from, when they were growing up in the 40s, 50s, 60s, you would get a job and you would have your job, and music was not, it just didn't sound very reliable. And also there was this kind of feeling that being intelligent and highly educated, why would you play music? That doesn't use your brain. It doesn't use your intelligence in the same way, which it doesn't really matter. It doesn't, I mean, I understand you want your kids to support themselves. I understand that. But it's too bad that the arts are still going through an evolution where I don't know, it's kind of like an either or. I don't think it should be that. I mean, I think it's becoming more common for people to do arts and crafts and music, and it should just be part of their daily life. You don't have to be like a professional. And if you are a professional, that's also a real job.
Yeah, it's interesting that all of you went into music in some capacity.
I just think it was what was enjoyable. And maybe for me, there might have also been a little bit of, let me prove it. I can prove this. I can show you this can be a real job.
At what point did they say, okay, all right, you were right?
I think when I had a song on the charts, on the radio and a song on the charts, they realized that this could be a real job. They would come to see me play in college, and even in high school I would perform, and people really seemed to enjoy it. But in college, they would come to see us perform, and we'd have packed houses, and we'd be, while we were selling our music, maybe not millions of copies of things, but hundreds of copies of things. I guess from my point of view as a musician, it looked pretty promising, like it was actually happening, even in college. But maybe they knew better. They would come to see me and my band, Liz and Lisa, and we'd have packed houses. And to me, that was like, oh, we're moving forward. There's steps being taken.
Right. Where would you play in Providence mostly?
Mostly at Brown University, where I went to school. But we also played at Lupo's and the Living Room and local events and things like that. And we'd play in Boston. I'm trying to think if we actually played there in college, but we'd play at like the Middle East and and we'd go to New York City and play at the Bitter End and, real places that, like as a musician, you're like, oh, this is like the real deal.
Backing up a little bit, I just remember another anecdote that I wanted to ask you about where you played Rock and Roll Suicide by David Bowie over at an assembly or at school or something.
So we jumped from first grade to college, or being out of college.
Yeah. There was some time in between.
Yeah, there was some time in between there. And between seventh, or I don't remember if it was seventh and eighth or eighth and ninth grade, I started playing guitar. I kind of switched from piano to guitar. I realized that although I see the value in classical music, and back in those days when you played piano, you really focused on classical piano. Now, if my kids take piano, most of the music teachers give them the option to learn popular songs as well. But that wasn't really the way of the world back then, where I was growing up. But with guitar, I felt like I could learn a lot of the songs that I loved by the bands I loved, which seemed very guitar driven, like David Bowie, The Police, Led Zeppelin. There were just so many bands that I loved. And like I said, I was a DJ. I went to an all girls school, and it was very unusual to be a guitar player and a rock guitar player. But also I was a DJ at the boys' school on their radio station. They had an FM radio station, and I would bring in my crates and crates and crates of records and play music from everything from classic rock to Brian Eno to local bands, new wave bands, kind of humorous stuff that wasn't music at all, like Man Falling Down the Stairs. And my friends and I would go interview bands who came to town, The Pretenders, The Alarm, just all these different bands. We were really interested to know like how things worked, and we were huge music fans. We made it clear we are not groupies, but we were huge music fans. We always felt kind of professional. Like one of my friends was more of a journalist, and one of my friends was more of like a host and a cinematographer. She'd be a good VJ. But anyway, so we were really ensconced in music, and I switched from piano to guitar, and I took lessons from a jazz guitar player who was a teacher at North Texas State in Dallas. And we'd work on similar things, theory, ear training, learning popular songs, learning some jazz songs, soloing, everything. So anyway, I got really into playing guitar. And although I had been encouraged by my piano teachers when I was a little kid in the single digits, like 6, 7, 8, to write my own music, I was also encouraged. And also just from inside, I really wanted to write my own music. And so I started writing more music with lyrics when I started playing guitar. And I started a little bit on acoustic, but quickly went to electric. But then I would bring my guitar with me to summer camp, and we'd write parody songs, and that was more on acoustic guitar. And then when I got into the older grades of high school, I started really getting into writing music. And I was at an acting program in London where there were a lot of people who would hear my songs, and they'd ask me for cassette copies of my music. So it started feeling like, wow, I've got this support, and I'm doing something that people are really connecting to. And I really enjoyed the satisfaction of having other people like my music, for sure. But I also enjoyed the process of writing music.
And when did you first start playing your songs with other people?
Like in a band?
Yeah.
Oh, in high school, we had a cover band that we would play songs. I'm trying to think if they played any of my music because I was already writing my own songs. So at these assemblies, I would play a couple songs that I wrote or a song that I wrote, and then I'd play a song with my friend Margaret, who was my best friend from growing up. We would sing together, and we played Space Oddity. Yeah, I played Rock and Roll Suicide on electric guitar, which I think was a little bit of a surprise at a girls' assembly.
Was there a reaction to that? Why do I know that anecdote? And did you get expelled or anything?
No, I didn't get expelled. I think there was a little bit of like, okay. Because again, it was like a little bit of an unusual thing to be you could count the girl electric guitar players on one hand or part of one hand. There were not a lot of us out there. And part of me just enjoyed the experience, I think, and part of me felt a little bit rebellious. It was an easy time to be rebellious too, because it was the 80s, Republican times in a very conservative town of Dallas.
Right.
But it was definitely kind of like a rebellious thing, but also I just loved this song so much. I was really, like most people do at that age, really just in tune with their songs that express things, that express feelings, that tell stories, maybe things a little bit outside of your own experience. I just wanted to share that song.
Growing up in Dallas, was this a place where you felt out of place?
I'd lived in Dallas such a long time, and I had friends going back to when I was literally born. In some ways, I felt very out of place and very alternative and very unusual. And I was a girl guitar player and a musician. Just being a musician and a songwriter, there was definitely a counterculture in Dallas that you could find in certain clubs like the Start Club, which was more kind of sophisticated and offbeat. Probably a lot of LGBTQ community there, a lot of style. And then there was Deep Ellum, which at the time was more of like skateboarders and like punk music, like the Butthole Surfers, and new wave music, and certain stores. Like there was a store that was owned by one of the Pretenders that had a lot of rockabilly stuff and a lot of clothes from London. So I felt like a strong delineation between sort of the mainstream and the alternative people. And I felt like I was an alternative person. And you could definitely feel that way. I mean, it still feels a little bit like that. People wear belts and loafers and stuff and khakis for real. Like, I guess they do that in Boston too, but like I'm in Los Angeles now, where it's very typical for a kid to wear shiny gold high tops to school, boy or girl, and hair length doesn't ever determine if it's a boy or a girl or whatever. It's just things are much more open here in Los Angeles,
right,
which is nice because then you can focus on being a human instead of having to think about whether you're outside of the mainstream. That being said, I felt on one hand really outside of the mainstream. On the other hand, I was president of the student council and I had a lot of friends and, did a bunch of regular stuff. So I wasn't way out there, but I felt a little bit way out there growing up in Dallas.
Right. So you go to Providence for Brown and
yeah,
you study. What did you study?
I studied comparative literature. It was a way for me to get a liberal arts degree, I thought. In retrospect, I probably should have chosen something different, but at the time I thought that was the thing to do. I did end up spending the majority of my time studying theater, acting in plays, and in other sort of scenarios where I was an actor and playing a lot of music and spending a lot of time. We had a recording studio class, which I took for 2 years. Plus, before that, we had to take an electronic music class. Luckily, our teacher, Shep Shapiro, went from teaching kind of more classical, alternative, electronic composition to letting a lot of us just make pop music or just make music songs. There were so many of us who we cared a lot about it. It wasn't like a lesser form of music. It was just we wanted to make songs. And there were so many people who are professional musicians and songwriters who came out of that world. So I didn't major in music, but I spent a lot of time playing music and in the music department.
Right. So around this time, and then you meet Liz.
Yeah, we met a week before freshman year. We got to school, you get to school a week before school starts. And we immediately, a week before we even started school, started playing music and quickly writing music and performing music. And we were really lucky to have the support of friends and our freshman hall. And from the minute we started, we always had packed houses and the support of upperclassmen, which was very exciting, people who we looked up to. And the challenge of having so many other musicians there, we really wanted to keep our standard of music high. It was great having the challenge and the support.
So was it that soon that you two started playing together that you knew that this was something you would begin to pursue as a career?
Yeah, it just felt like the right thing. Like, I don't know. I mean, in retrospect, it totally makes sense. Because even when I was a kid, I was so interested in everything about music. A lot of us are, like what the album covers look like and what do the songs sound like? And I wonder how they recorded this. And, those questions got even more specific as I got older, and curiosity about bands and how they work. And the music business I was curious about, even in high school. And I think in college, even freshman year, we had a connection through Liz's dad to Jason Flom, who was at Atlantic Records. He wasn't the head of anything yet, but he had signed some major bands, and we went and met with him as freshmen in college to see if he was interested in our music and our recordings. So there was just, I don't know, there's just some drive in me to always be a part of it. I don't know why or how that worked, but it was just something that seemed right. I don't know if there was a little bit of a challenge there, kind of being in the right place in the right time and going backstage and talking to the bands and being a musician. And I was still always a huge music fan, but I don't know where that crossover came from. Maybe a little bit like I started realizing, oh, you can get paid to play music, and there's like a satisfaction in how many fans you can get, how many people you can get to sign up on your mailing list, and having a successful concert where you wrote music that you're proud of and people enjoyed it and a lot of people showed up. There's something really exciting about that. I don't know. It was sort of a seamless transition. And I think deciding to become a professional musician almost came more after I was already doing it. Like I didn't say one day I'm going to be a professional musician and then start playing music. Like I already was playing music and developing an audience with my friend Liz and recording music and selling our music and making t-shirts and putting together fundraisers where we could use our music and our fans' interest to like raise money for other people. And I don't know, it was just all of us were already doing it. There were so many of us in college just doing it.
And then after school, you and Liz kind of part ways.
We moved to New York, actually,
Yeah.
and we were playing a lot of gigs in New York for a while and recording more. And then we did part ways, yeah. She had a band that she was in with her then boyfriend, now husband, Ida. The band was called Ida. We just sort of had different ideas, I think, of what we wanted to do. And we'd been a band for 6 years already. I think I felt more of a pull to be like a commercial music person, like who had a record deal with a major label. And she had more of like an indie music street, which was working well for her boyfriend and for their band, Ida.
Right. And then, is this right that you finished writing Stay while at a Berklee program?
Yeah, I went to Berklee summer school. I was one of those weird grown-ups. Now, looking back, I was just a child. I was like 22 years old or something. It was probably like 1991, 1992.
Yeah.
And I realized that my younger brother had gone to Berklee when he was a teenager and, as a summer student. And I loved that idea of being able to take a handful of weeks and just sit in a practice room and practice. I always felt so distracted by doing temp work, by making flyers for my shows, by having a social life, like going to parties. Like I always did a lot of different things. I took dance classes. But I wanted to be like that 8th grade boy, no offense, not being sexist, but there are a lot of 8th grade boys I knew who did spend the majority of their time sitting in their room playing music, playing keyboards, figuring out how the synthesizer worked, sitting with their amp and playing for hours and hours and hours. When I was in high school and in 8th grade, I was in a play and I was in an independent movie and I went to religious school and I took dance classes and I did my homework and I had a bunch of friends and I was just doing so many other things in addition to writing music and playing music, but I wanted that focus. So I went to Berklee Music School and I did get a bit of that focus. But yeah, I remember sitting near the Prudential building on one of those concrete benches that looks more just like a box, a large box, working on the song Stay, which I had started writing because I heard Daryl Hall was looking for songs. So I wanted to write kind of an R&B song with like an R&B lick and an R&B feel. I even asked my amazing Berklee student roommate who had this amazing R&B voice, like Whitney Houston, if she would sing the song for me, and she said no.
Why?
She wasn't always the kindest person. She just wasn't very open and kind.
Did you ever get a so there moment with her?
No, I didn't. But she wasn't very, she wouldn't take messages on the answering machine.
Oh, that kind of situation.
It was very weird. I didn't get it exactly. But anyway, so I sung the song myself.
Wow. So who was the woman who was singing your song?
I'm embarrassed, but it's hypothetical. I think it was just, there are so many. I know it wasn't a specific woman. It's just when you turn on the radio and you have that experience of like, that's my life.
Right.
That's my life. Like they're singing my song in a poetic way. Like they're singing my life, kind of like strumming your life with my fingers or whatever. I do love that lyric. I can't think of it right off. Strumming my life with your fingers.
Singing My Life with a Song.
My song, yeah. Roberta Flack. But Fugees, but it's not their song. Somebody else wrote it.
But yeah, that's funny because I always ask that. Like I asked Bob Seger what song he was humming from 1963.
Was there a specific one, or did he just like the lyric?
Yeah, it was Be My Baby.
Oh, I recorded Be My Baby.
Yeah?
I just did a recording of Be My Baby for my Lullaby Girl album. We did a version of it, and I got to meet Ronnie Spector, and she was super awesome. And
that's terrific.
When I met Phil Spector years ago, I introduced him to a producer I worked with a lot, who is now a photographer I work with a lot, Juan Patino. And I said to Phil Spector, this is my producer, Juan Patino. And Phil Spector said, I'm sorry for you. And I didn't know who he said he was sorry for. Like, he's sorry for my friend Juan, who is a producer, and how difficult it is to deal with people like me. But anyway, it was very dramatic and funny.
So doing the children's albums, you started doing children's albums before you had a child.
Yes. I have a real nostalgia for my childhood. Like I said, I listened to a lot of records growing up, and I watched a lot of TV, and there was a lot of entertainment back then there was less stuff geared specifically towards kids. That was sort of an up and coming concept. So Sesame Street back in the early days, I loved. And it was really a play on grown-up entertainment. Like they'd have fake commercials and just very high-level humor and a lot of heart and storytelling. And I'd watch all these TV shows that were meant for grown-ups, but they were entertaining and colorful, literally colorful. So I wanted to make something like that when I started doing kids' music, which is good because I think now in retrospect, I really know that you should never talk down to kids. There is a lot more of a span of what feels right to make for families and kids. I ended up doing some of that that was very for kids. Like after I had kids, I recorded nursery rhymes, which is specifically for kids, which I think is really important. But when I first started out, I wanted to make things that were funny and heartfelt and reminded me of the stuff that I liked to listen to and watch when I was a kid.
What is the thing that you've done that gives you the most cool cred as a mom with them?
I think when we get to go to concerts and they get to meet, they're not all about meeting the musicians at all, but I think getting to go to concerts, like my husband is in music as well, and we went to go see Purity Ring, which was one of my daughter's favorite bands, open for Katy Perry, who's very popular, and a band that my kids liked at the time, and we got to go backstage and meet her. Or like we got to go see the Harlem Globetrotters and meet the band, meet the Harlem Globetrotters afterward. Or we got to go recently to a movie premiere for a movie called Descendants 2, which is a Disney TV movie. And my kids love Descendants 1. And we got to go to the premiere and see the movie and get free popcorn and watch and meet the actors and have a party and get the cool goodie bag with the water bottle and the goodie bag that was like a tote bag with Descendants 2 written on it. So some of those things are really cool. Oh, and I was on Fuller House recently. They got to come visit the set and meet the actors and see how the show is made. And it's really a bonus, which I think people from Berklee will appreciate too, that it's not just about famous actors and the end product and seeing things on TV or hearing the record. My kids get to experience, between my husband and I and our jobs, they get to experience the full experience. They get to meet the costume designers and the production designers and the props people and the lighting designers and the engineers and the people who wrote the music and the people who wrote the script. And that, there's so many different things, and they still get the specialness like we all do of the final product of just watching the show or just listening to the record. It's really neat. And I'm excited for them to have that and to understand, unlike I did when I was a kid, that there's so many different interesting creative jobs that you can have in addition to other great jobs like being a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher. But there's also so many opportunities to work in creative fields. And I love that my kids can see that on a daily basis.
Yeah, are you, in contrast to your parents, more encouraging to them if they would ever want to go into the arts?
Yeah, I mean, my parents don't get me wrong, my parents paid for all the lessons, wanted us to take everything, wanted us to see every concert and musical, and my mom would stay up all night with us to wait for tickets for Elton John, in 1978. They were super into music. They'd wake us up because certain bands were going to be on TV. Once Kiss was going to be on TV without their makeup, and they woke us up at midnight to see them on TV. They didn't actually show their faces, but so they were super into it. I don't think I have unrealistic fear. I have realistic fear about them going into the creative arts. But I don't have the fear. I just have a realistic point of view. And unfortunately, it's the same with being a doctor, or being a lawyer, or being a teacher, being a business person. Unfortunately, things are not as set in stone as they used to be. So I think it's really, really important for people to do what they love in life. I also think it's really important for people to make a living. I think that creates mental stability and financial stability. And sometimes it means having more than one job. Sometimes you want to separate your creative life from your job life. Sometimes it's the same thing. Sometimes your creative creative life, like I'm a professional musician, but I like taking dance classes and drawing and coloring. And there's so many different things you can do. It's just important to continue to learn how to balance your life and create support in your life so you could do what you love. And even on Friday, like my daughter's taking her ukulele lesson, and I asked the teacher to stick around to teach me drums after her ukulele lesson. Like I can play a little bit, but I realized we have a drum kit at our house. This is really nice. Like I can kind of play drums, but I love taking lessons. So, figuring out how much structure you need in your life, lessons, no lessons, learning online, doing it just because you love it, really continuing to prioritize your health, your sleep, your financial health so that you can afford the life you live, but also try to fit in there things that bring you engagement and joy, whatever that means to you. It's always a process.
You talk about how the 8th grade boy alone in his room playing guitar and you doing all these extracurriculars. I mean, you've made several careers of that with the eyewear, the coffee, and the acting.
Yeah, and I think also just being able to relate to others to the extent that you can, I think helps any career. And for me, that, growing up in Dallas, as much as it was a conservative place, going to an all-girls school, literally being able to learning to look someone in the eye and get over my shyness and say, hi, I'm Lisa, and like just talk to people, that, can get you as far as a lot of other things in your life that took a lot longer to learn and to practice. So it's just, again, it's like a balance and continually figuring out like what are your strengths? What are things you would like to be more strong in? Give yourself a break sometimes, but also constantly challenge yourself to have a vision of who you are, who you want to be. All that stuff I think is important. It's all a process.
Right. Well, let's talk about the new album, A Simple Trick to Happiness. I hear, there's a lot of you're thinking about your life and your mortality and figuring out whether or not you are happy with where you are and coming to a decision on that.
Right. You know what? It's funny. When I started writing music, I wanted things to be really private and personal, and I liked really abstract lyrics. I'd listen to bands like The Cure and Led Zeppelin, and I had no idea what they were talking about. Sometimes I was like, wow, this is a really great way to express myself without people knowing my true feelings and everything and what I'm really thinking about. I also think, especially in my college years, I found it very disturbing when I would hear music that sounded, especially by people who weren't professional yet, to hear songs that just sounded too personal, like they weren't crafted enough. So I kind of avoided personal stories. But I realized between the success of Stay, which was my first real personal story there are definitely huge patches of lyrics in the song that nobody would ever know what I'm talking about. But there were things that were very personal to me. It came from a very personal place of an argument with a boyfriend at the time that I was writing about. And that always reminds me the way people connect with that song. I found over the years, the more personal I can be and the more honest I can be, the more people connect. And I love that feeling as a musician when people connect with what I'm singing. I love the Oprah moments, as I call them, where I get to tell my stories and people tell me their stories, whether it's through music or through just a conversation. And so on this album, and for the last many years, it's been my goal to, instead of hiding what I'm going through, to really connect with that. And also as a person who's a little bit older, I'm not like a 25-year-old writing about love and lost love. I'm in a happy marriage. I've got kids. I'm happy, generally happy in life. I'm concerned with the world and the earth. But I realized I need to put that into my music. I need to put what I am going through, what issues I do have or feelings or experience I am having, put those into my music. Because there are so many people who are my peers. Some are a lot younger than I am. Some are my age who are going through the same thing. And there's something about that connection, about being able to write your story. It should be crafted. It should not sound like it's just plopped out of your journal unless you meant it to be that way. So this current album, A Simple Trick to Happiness, is very personal. There's non-romantic stories about people that I miss. There's songs about questioning old friendships. There's songs about celebrating yourself and who you are, which was this one song called Sing Out, which I specifically wrote with Eric Lumiere, another songwriter. We wrote it about to celebrate people for a Pride event in Nashville, for Nashville Pride. So I was trying to tackle issues and things that I personally am going through. And so far, what I've heard from people's responses, and also before the album came out and I was out there playing the songs live, people of all ages connect with them. And so that I'm excited to continue on that, writing personal songs. I still write a lot of songs that aren't my story. Like I'm asked to write songs for different projects, and it's really fun to use the stories or the information that I'm given to write songs and craft songs for those scenarios. But I feel like a lot of musicians, as they get older, fall into a generic song trap. And I don't want to be in a generic song trap. I think it's important for new writers, old writers, young and old writers to try to do things that are unique to them. I think we all experience a lot of the same issues and situations. So I think that's okay. I try not to be embarrassed about that anymore. I wanted everything to be unique and new and original all the time. But turns out we're humans and we go through a lot of the same things. But just continue to try to do my original take on what those stories are, but still be truthful.
Just one last question, because you mentioned the Oprah moments and connecting to people, and the song Stay, that was your first connection to people, to a mass audience.
Yeah.
And I imagine a lot of people would, it's the type of song a lot of people would probably come up to you and tell you what it meant to them on a personal level. Tell me a little bit about that and what any of those particular stories might have been that affected you the most.
It's so amazing how that song has affected so many people. And I'm lucky because that song was written, even though it became a huge hit, I wasn't signed to a label yet. It was a song I wrote the way I wanted to write it. It's a very unusual song structure. It's like, I'd have to take it apart, but it's kind of like A, B, C, B, A, or like, it's very unusual. There's no chorus. And that has given me so much creative freedom to know that a song can be popular even if it's not. I don't know, sometimes when we sit down to write popular songs, we go to a very classic song structure and we try to be really simple. And I don't know why that is. It is, as songwriters know, it's a very Zen thing to be trying really hard to write something really good and then also trying not hard at all and just letting it come out. And anyway, hearing people tell me that is the song that, you know, that was the song that people were listening to when they first started dating and then they got married, or they realized that was a song that both people loved. And so that kept them together. Somebody and their mother, that was the song they loved together, or they used to sing it in the back seat with their sister when they were little and they knew every word, or they made up new words to it at summer camp. And that was like really fun and funny for them to do. Or, you know, I see a drag queen singing it dressed as me. There's so many heartfelt and nostalgic and funny stories about it, and even sad stories like, oh, that song got me through a breakup. Because again, like sometimes when you hear your feelings and your emotions, or that woman is singing your song, you feel alive and you feel like everything's going to be okay, even if it's a difficult situation for you. You
are, to some people, that woman who is singing their song, you know?
Yeah, and I have to say, you know, growing up as such a huge music fan, you know, as a professional musician, sure, I think everybody wants to sell a cajillion records and have people take all of their music really, really seriously and know all the lyrics. And, you know, I would love for people to know I write a lot of music that has orchestral arrangements, and some of it's super rock and some of it's very acoustic and, you know, emo, and some of it's funny. Like I write some really funny songs for kids, and I would love for people to know all the different kinds of things I do and to know what my live concerts are like. But to even have one song that people really, really connect with, I also really, really appreciate that. I am a music fan who sometimes connects with the one song or a one song that I know about from an artist. And luckily, through being friendly with other musicians who have had a similar experience, some have taken it in a very bad way and they're very upset about it, that they only have the one or the two or the three songs that people connect with. And other people who I think I've learned more from are the people who take those experiences and the success they've had from the one or the two or the three songs and parlay it into a way to really reach a huge audience. And, you know, they have, just like me, we've got fans in a lot of different places, and maybe they come to a concert to hear that one song, but they end up hearing a lot of different songs and having a fuller experience. And it's very satisfying.
Very satisfying. Just like talking to Lisa Loeb. I just love her practical outlook of how that one hit from more than 25 years ago could continue to introduce her listeners to her new material. Speaking of which, A Simple Trick to Happiness is out now. Keep checking on lisaloeb.com for her latest tour dates. Hopefully one of these days we'll be able to stop sheltering at home and go see some live music again. But right now, of course, you know, it's important to stay home and flatten the curve. So, at the top of the show, I told you about how you can receive a $100 discount on a Berklee Online course. Here's how. Head over to musicismylifepod.com and redeem this special offer. And you'll also get a link to all sorts of free resources. This episode was edited by Talia Smith, mastered by Melissa Henderson, all visual assets coordinated by Mike DeBenedictis, social media by Brooke Larson, web assistance courtesy of Mark Thomas, Steve Zimmerman, Joe McDonough, and Chris Keene. I wrote and recorded the Music Is My Life theme song, but the expert remixing comes from Lily Dickinson. Special thanks to Gabriel Reifer-Cohen, to the great Beth Blends-Klukas, to Janet Billig-Rich, who I'm hoping will join us someday as a guest, and thanks to you for listening. Take note to join us on Monday, May 11th for special guest Eddie Grant. Boy, I'm excited. Stay healthy, listeners. We'll talk soon.